In 1908, one moment changes the life of a 10-year-old boy as he witnesses Felice Nazzaro win the Circuito di Bologna. He decides then and there that one day it would be him behind the wheels. But that all was just a dream. He had little to no education and came from a poor family where his father worked as a local blacksmith. This was during a time when only the wealthy elite had access to these kinds of opportunities. However, little did he know that 39 years later, his name would be the synonym for speed, power, and luxury. This is the story of how a poor blacksmith boy invented the Ferrari. Let's turn back time to about 100 years ago in Modena, Italy, in 1898. Little Enzo came into this world during a raging storm. His father, a blacksmith, was only able to report his birth 2 days late due to the weather, leading to a wrong date on his birth certificate. The boy grew up in relative poverty, but his early life was not without its joys. He quickly developed a passion for mechanical, spending more of his time in his father's workshop helping to repair cars than going to school. In return for Enzo's assistance, his father would teach him how to drive. Enzo took to it easily, and as years passed, his interest in cars only grew. Growing up without much formal education and living in poverty, Enzo and his family did their best to make the blacksmith and car repair garage work. However, there was nothing to be done as tragedy struck the world. World War I erupted in Europe. Misfortune came in waves, and misery loved company. Before Enzo's father and older brother could be drafted to war, they passed away in the deadly Spanish flu outbreak of 1916. Needless to say, the family business fell through, and Enzo was recruited as a military blacksmith. Yet, fate was not kind to him, and he too fell victim to the pandemic in 1918. The illness almost sent him to reunite with his father and brother, but luckily, Enzo survived. Even so, his health was so poor that the military discharged him that year, and he found himself urgently seeking employment. Without his family business, money, or formal education, there wasn't a lot Enzo could do to earn a living. He moved to the city out of desperation and applied for many jobs that would allow him to employ his passion and knowledge of cars. He applied to multiple companies, including Fiat, but they all rejected him for various reasons. Finally, though, his luck turned around as he landed himself a position as a test driver with CMN, a company that remodeled trucks into passenger cars. At CMN, things started looking up as Enzo's remarkable skills and abilities quickly began earning him recognition. From a mere test driver, Enzo was soon promoted to become a race car driver, representing the company in various competitions. He made his debut in 1919 in the Parma Poggio di Perceto Hill Climb Race, where he finished 4th, surprising many people with his performance. He joined other competitions later that year, but due to fuel tank leaks and other reasons causing him to retire from the race, Enzo couldn't repeat the success of his first race. Ambitious and in want of a greater challenge, Enzo left CMN and joined Alfa Romeo, the top Italian race car company of the time. Working with Alfa Romeo was probably the happiest and the most bitter period in his life. As a passionate young man, Enzo worked hard to pursue his dreams. His struggles paid off in 1923 when he won the first Grand Prix in Circuito del Savio in Ravenna, which is considered one of the most competitive tracks in Italy. Not one to slow down on a winning streak, Enzo continued bringing in one win after the other. Ferrari wasn't the only company using the Baracca emblem as its logo. They shared it with Porsche. And yet, it was Ferrari who received the recognition. Despite proving themselves to be timeless legends, the team faced a threat like no other. Their supporter, Alfa Romeo, ran into financial difficulties and pulled out as their sponsor in 1933. Without proper support, the team suffered, struggling to prove their worth to other sponsors. Eventually, they made a notable but difficult victory against the Germans, who dominated the tracks in 1935 thanks to the technical superiority of their cars. Despite their contribution, the team eventually disbanded in 1937. Enzo returned to work for Alfa Romeo as the company tried to revive a race team under a similar name, with Enzo in charge as the team's manager. Alfa Corse only lasted for a short while and did not achieve any notable successes though, as Enzo and the managing director of Alfa Romeo fought over various issues. Enzo was a man of strong determination and belief. He would not back down, and eventually, Alfa Romeo gave Enzo a fat severance package while forcing onto him a 4-year-long non-compete agreement that he could not race or design any race cars under his name in the period. Without other options, Enzo was forced to agree. If Alfa Romeo thought that the prancing horse would yield to its demands, however, they had something else coming for them. Enzo left with the money and decided to use the loophole in his non-compete contract to start a company of his own. The Auto Aviani Costruzioni factory produced car parts, with Enzo designing cars that other drivers drove in races in order to escape the legal limitations. Things started to look up for a while, as Enzo was able to prosper despite his non-compete restriction. All was well until the year 1939, when a disaster like no other in history struck the world. On the 1st of September, the Third Reich invaded Poland, and the entirety of Europe was thrown into the pandemonium that was World War II. Italy was no exception, with Mussolini's regime suddenly tightening its hold on the citizens. Once again, Enzo could not escape. However, he wasn't drafted to serve in the military this time. Instead, his factory was forced to switch to producing war supplies, not one to take things lying down. Enzo made the most out of his situation and befriended certain political figures for financial benefits during the war. He even went so far as to join the fascist party, appearing at their events in full uniform. As a result of that, on top of getting various profitable government contracts, his company remained intact for most of the conflict, except for towards the end of the war when the Allies decided to bomb his main factory, deeming it to be a strategic military target. Not one to cry over such trivialities, Enzo used that opportunity to ditch his flattened factory and relocate from Modena to Maranello. The desperate times forced Enzo to play for both sides of the war, publicly making friends with the fascist government and privately appealing to the Parisian freedom fighters. While the strategy paid off on the economic level, it took no time for a bounty to be placed on his head. But Enzo forged ahead with his business and dream. Not even death threats could stop this man from working. He had evaded multiple attempts at his life, both from the government and the Parisians, and at some point even reportedly paying off the man who put a price on his head. Despite all those victories, though, while other businesses have been crippled or destroyed by the war, Ferrari emerged happy with how racing was depicted in the media. He supported a new publication featuring motorsports called Autosprint. He was also featured in numerous other magazine articles, making it Enzo's golden age from the 1950s to the 1960s. Past that, Enzo's glory faded and waned in 1962. Many people who worked with Enzo knew about his tough personality. That personality pulled him out of the pits every single time. He survived the flu pandemic that killed many others, won races that nobody expected him to win, created the most legendary race team ever in Alfa Romeo, and proved that his cars work better time and again on the track. He created many historical moments, struggled to survive the Second World War, helped keep his head despite a bounty, and fought against the charges of manslaughter to create a new image for race car driving. Yet it was also this very personality that dragged him down in times of peace and prosperity. A famous example of that was the Great Walkout, when the man fired 9 important company employees on the spot when they petitioned against his decision to make his wife a manager in his company. The group, including chief engineers as well as business and marketing experts, left to create their own company, which would then go on to produce cars challenging on the racetrack. Enzo didn't hesitate to choose what he thought was right, and while it was a loss for the company, some said it was a blessing in disguise. With so many key positions suddenly empty, Enzo spent a good year or so massively recruiting and promoting junior talents. Fortunately, the new blood in his team fared no worse than the previous team, who started their own company to rival Ferrari. In fact, some of Ferrari's greatest masterpieces were developed by the new blood in Enzo's team after the Great Walkout. Despite the silver lining, the timing of the Great Walkout catalyzed rumors circulating Enzo's Spartan-like training method for race drivers, leading to his fall from grace in the public eye. Many, both in the industry and out of it, would go on to blame him for the rising number of deaths among his drivers. Enzo had a philosophy of pushing past limits and breaking barriers. He often pitted his racers against each other in training to improve their track performance. As a result of the immense pressure he put on his drivers, rumors circulated out of control when 4 of his drivers died in a span of 2 years, even when their cause of death wasn't due to mechanical malfunctions. Enzo's success was paid for with blood. At the same time, Enzo was constantly making enemies in the industry. Some of the more remarkable people he offended were Henry Ford II, Ferruccio Lamborghini, and Carroll Shelby. Much to his credit, each of the 3 developed such a grudge for him that they would later go and create cars, or in Ferruccio's case, even entire companies, solely for the purpose of one-upping him and hitting him where it hurt. Enzo's reputation and the rumors that circulated him started to negatively affect the entirety of Ferrari, threatening everything that he had built. Eventually, Ferrari's financial situation worsened, even after they tried to make ends meet by selling sports cars. The new car production safety guidelines caused Enzo a huge headache, so he sought out business partners with the condition of retaining all control over the racing department. His first potential partner, Henry Ford, was willing to pay a generous amount for the partnership, but his refusal to give Enzo full rights over the racing development broke negotiations at the last moment. Thankfully, Enzo found Fiat, the very company that had rejected him initially when he first applied for a job, and that was now more happy to agree to his terms. By 1965, Fiat and Ferrari became a joint share company, with Fiat getting smaller shares than Ferrari. Enzo invested himself in racing and less with the finances. After some time, he sold more shares in 1969 to Fiat, so both companies shared 50% each. The hefty sum he sold his shares for was enough for Enzo to indulge in a less-known car project in 1971. He made cheaper sports cars called Dino in memory of his first son, who passed away at age 25 from Duchenne muscular dystrophy. This rare degenerative disease progressively destroys the legs, arms, and heart muscles. Enzo's second son, born to his mistress and only legitimized after his wife's death, has survived and still works at Ferrari, holding 10% of the stock. Letting go of everything in his life except racing, Enzo spent his silver years managing the racing team. Even if they failed to regain his former glory, he managed to celebrate Ferrari's 40th anniversary just before he passed away at the ripe old age of 90 in 1988. As for his last request, a 2-day delay had been put in place to make up for the error birth in his death. Passion and obsession are different sides of the same coin. For a man like Enzo Ferrari, could his legacy have been any more perfect?